We're going to look at APA formatting and style guide in this video. So the APA is a publication manual of the American Psychological Association. We're going to be looking at the 7th edition, and it contains detailed guidelines and formatting for formatting a paper in APA style. So APA style is most commonly used for the social sciences and mathematics and the sort of stuff that we would be looking into. APA format provides writers with a format for cross-referencing their sources. We're going to talk about that as we go on. And from their parenthetical references to their reference page. So basically, it's a good way of cross-referencing data. And we see the word stylistics. Stylistics is just the style. It's a study of the distinctive styles found in particular literary genres and in the works of individual writers. So let's move to the point of view. First person pronouns rather than third person. The third person point of view belongs to the person or people being talked about. The third person pronouns include he, him, his, himself, she, her, hers, herself, it, its, itself, and so on. So let's look at this one. It says first person pronouns, and well, let's just talk a little bit about a noun and a pronoun. A noun is a word that describes a person, place, thing, or idea. So examples of nouns include names, locations, objects in the physical world, or objects and concepts that do not exist in the physical world. So for example, a dream or a theory. A pronoun, on the other hand, is a word that replaces a noun in a sentence. So for example, I could say Jeremy ran so fast, you'd think Jeremy's life was on the line. I've used Jeremy twice there. Instead of using Jeremy I can say Jeremy ran so fast, you'd think his life was on the line. So that replacement of Jeremy with his is what the pronoun is. So the example we have here is we conducted an experiment, first person. The authors conducted an experiment is not, that's third person. Okay. So active voice. APA stylistics related to the voice in the APA paper, which encourages a writer to use the active voice, is going to be looked at here. So the active voice is, well, let me explain that bit. So in a sentence written in the active voice, the subject of sentence performs the action. In a sentence written in the passive voice, the subject receives the action. So let's look at this. We asked participants questions. That's going to be the active voice. Rather than the participants have been asked questions, that was something that was done to them. That would be passive. Sometimes you do use the passive voice. Passive voice is going to be used when stressing the recipient or object of the action. So the tests were inconclusive is passive, rather than we found the test inconclusive. So sometimes you do use passive and sometimes active. Most of the time you use active though. Let's move on. So language in an APA paper should be clear, concise, and plain. So clarity and conciseness are the major concerns when reporting research in APA. It's not easy to balance clarity, which requires accuracy, and conciseness, which requires packaging information together. To achieve clarity, we as writers should avoid vague wording and be specific in descriptions and explanations. And to achieve conciseness, a writer, we, all of us, should condense information. Because the APA format is widely used in many fields, especially the fields we're going to be working on, the language of APA format is plain and simple. A writer should avoid using metaphors and minimize the use of figurative language, which is typical for creative writing. Well, we're not really going to be so much into the creative writing so much. So let's have a look. I'm sorry about that. Let's just brought that up. So I was just going to give you an example of a metaphor. So a good metaphor is something like my brother is the black sheep of the family, and well, my brother's not a sheep, so that's an example of a metaphor. So basically, a metaphor is something that has is a figure of speech that it makes an implicit, implied, or hidden comparison between two things that are unrelated. So okay, so let's have some more examples of these things as we move on. So let's replace several vague words with more powerful and specific words. So yeah, we don't want to be too wordy. So let's look at the example. The politician talked about several of the merits of after-school programs in his speech. And that's 14 words. So talked about several of the merits of, and they've just replaced it with the word touted as an example. So you can cut things down fairly substantially. Let's look at some more examples. Susie believed, but could not confirm, that Billy had feelings of affection for her, and that could be cut down to Susie assumed that Billy adored her. My undergraduate was mathematics, and when you're very analytical, sometimes it's difficult to actually précis or cut these sentences down because you may feel that they don't mean exactly the same thing, but we're looking for an overall feeling of getting the same information across. And it may not seem using exactly the same words, but conciseness is going to be very important. So I understand if some of you may be thinking, well, that's not exactly the same thing. Well, it's pretty close. The next one, our website has made available many of the things you can use for making a decision on the best dentist. And as opposed to our website presents criteria for determining the best dentist. So again, you can cut down words, and you can see another example there with pupils. And let's look at another external aspect we should look at. We should look at every single word in a sentence and see if we're just carrying them, like it says, if they're dead weight. So let's look at this. The teacher demonstrated some of the various ways and methods of cutting words from an essay that I had written for the class. We could just change that to the teacher demonstrated methods for cutting words from my essay. Much shorter, much cleaner, much more concise. And let's look at another one. Well, that's really quite a long one, but many have made the wise observation that when a stone is in motion rolling down a hill or incline, that moving stone is not as likely to be covered all over with the kind of thick green moss that grows on stationary unmoving things and becomes a nuisance, and suggests that those things haven't moved in a long time and probably won't move anytime soon. So they've just replaced that rolling stone gathers no moss, which is a saying in the English language. So they're just making a kind of a extreme example, and yet a good example to show that sometimes we can over elaborate and maybe use too many words. Combining sentences, you may combine two sentences into one. Ludwig's castles are an astounding marriage of beauty and madness, period. By his death, he had commissioned 3 castles, period. 2 sentences. They've taken the 3 castles, put it in the first sentence, and it reads, Ludwig's 3 castles are an astounding marriage of beauty and madness. And that's only 11 words. So you cut out 7 words by doing that. There's one more example here. The supposed crash of UFO in Roswell, New Mexico aroused interest in extraterrestrial life, period. Second sentence, the crash is rumored to have occurred in 1947. And that you take the 1947 from the second sentence and put it into the first and just have one sentence. And you go from 24 words down to 16 words. So this slide is going to introduce the quantitative article. So quantitative articles report quantitative research, which uses basically numbers, and it may be empirical, like based on our experience, but information and analysis normally through statistical means. So it's basically when you do a paper and it's to do with numbers and you've analyzed the numbers. So we report quantitative research, which uses empirical and numerical information, often analyzed through statistical means, and it includes these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things: the title page, abstract, introduction, method, results, and discussion. And that's it. The abstract is just an APA abstract is a summary of your paper in about 150 to 250 words. It basically describes the research problem, the methods you use, the results and conclusions of your research. And for published papers, it also includes a list of keywords, and we'll talk about that later, but you put keywords in there, so if somebody's doing a search on the internet, they'll be able to find your paper through these keywords. Okay, so let's move on from that. Qualitative articles. Qualitative articles are articles which use scientific practices to learn more about items that cannot be numerically quantified. So qualitative is non-numerical, and you can actually use numbers in qualitative papers, but those numbers are just normally labels. They're not real numbers. So I just want to qualify that. So that's qualitative articles. They look fairly similar. If I just flash back, you'll see that these two are fairly similar. It says results here, and here it says findings and results. So let's move on to the literature review. A literature review paper is a summary of what the scientific literature in the discipline or field of study says about the topic of research. And it's the genre that students like yourselves are likely to encounter in their academic studies. So whatever subject we're studying, that's what we're likely to be looking at. The papers, literature papers include an introduction, a thesis statement, a summary, a synthesis of sources, and a reference list. So a literature review can just be a paper, or it could be part of a thesis. If you're doing your PhD thesis, a literature review will be a large part of your PhD thesis. Or you can just write a paper which is just a literature review. Many people do that. So what is a thesis statement? A thesis statement usually appears at the conclusion of the introductory paragraph of a paper. It offers a concise summary of the main point or claim of the essay or the research paper, whatever you're writing. It is usually expressed in one sentence, and the statement may be reiterated elsewhere. You may repeat what you've said elsewhere. Just because you actually said something in the thesis statement, it doesn't mean you can't repeat it in the paper. You don't want to be repetitive in your paper, but you can do it with a thesis statement. And summary and synthesis of sources is when you look for areas where your sources agree or disagree and try to draw broader conclusions about your topic based on what your sources say. That would be the summary and the synthesis. So what happens if you've got papers that aren't quantitative or qualitative or a literature review? Well, it says either consult your instructor or go to the APA publication manual, and that you can find that online as well. So the general format we're going to look at, if it's not quantitative, qualitative, or a literature review, we're actually going to look at the following 6 slides, I believe, and they're going to show us how to do the formatting, etc., on papers. So let's move on from that. So the essay should be, as you can see, you can read that, it should be typed double-spaced. Double space means one space between lines, have 1-inch margins all the way around, and you can use a standard font like 10 to 12 points in Times New Roman. It doesn't have to be Times New Roman. but a fairly standard one, and be printed on standard 8.5 by 11 paper. Every page in your essay should include those following items. The document should include a page header indicating a shortened title of the essay and a page number in the upper right hand of every page, including the title page. So let's look at the layout. So we could see from this layout what we're supposed to do, or a guideline as to what we should actually do. So an abstract, well, there's a title page, and then an abstract page and a list of references, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what you need. It's actually quite important to remind you that each page should have a page header with a shortened version of the title and page number. So, and that's normally the page numbers to right aligned. This stuff means more to us when we actually start writing the papers, because right now it's kind of difficult to take in, but once we actually start writing the paper, then we're going to be referencing this, and this is going to make a lot more sense as we go through it. Now, APA 7 distinguishes between professional and student papers in terms of paper formatting. We note that most of the differences extend only to the title page and the running header, and that's you can just see what it says here. Okay, let's look at an example. So this is a visual example for the proper placement of the page header and the full title on the cover page of the student paper. Now, student papers require no headers other than the page number, which is all the way to the right, flush to the right. You can type the complete title in the upper half of the page, bolded and centered. Below the title, type your name and your affiliation, if you're at whatever university you're at. Let's look at this. That was the student paper. Let's look at the professional paper now. This is a visual for the proper placement of the page header and the full title on the cover page of a professional paper. You're going to type a shortened form of the paper's title in all capitals in the page header. You're going to flush left with the page number flushed right. You're going to type the complete title in the upper half of the page, bolded and centered. Below the title, type your name, your affiliation, which is going to be your university, unless it's your company. So going on with the professional paper. So this is again looking at a visual example for the proper placement of the author note on the cover page of a professional paper. So label the note with the words author note, bolded and centered. Following this, you may provide any or all of the following: links to the ORCID IDs. Now, the ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID, and it's a non-proprietary alphanumeric code that uniquely identifies scientific and other academic authors and contributors. The next thing is affiliation changes. Maybe you change schools or you change work and there's been some sort of change. Any special disclosures or acknowledgements, and then contact info. You can put contact info for the corresponding author, and omit any items that are not relevant. Okay, let's look at the abstract page. So this is a visual of the abstract page, which consists of a page header, a heading labeled abstract, and a brief summary of the paper, accurately presenting its contents. Professional papers should contain a running head in the header, and that's flush left, and a page number, and that's going to be flush right. Student papers should contain only the page number. Type the heading, abstract, centered at the top of the page. Below, type the paragraph of the paper summary between 150 and 200 words in block format without indentation. The abstract should contain the research topic, research questions, participants, methods, results, data analysis, and conclusions. It may also include possible implications of your research and future work you see connected with your findings. Sometimes this is actually put at the back, like the future work and implications. Sometimes that goes at the back. Even when we're looking at this APA style, a lot of journals, a lot of papers will require you to do things a certain way. They will, if they tell you to use APA 7 style, you may do it, but they may change the order of stuff, or they have slight differences which aren't violating APA, because there's certain things in APA that are specific and must be specifically done a certain way. There's other things where you have leeway to do it a slightly different way. So a short list of keywords labeled with keywords. That's a novel idea there. So we're going to call keywords, and we put that in italics, and that's written in line with the text. And that should follow the abstract. And these terms and concepts that are going to make it helpful, they may make it helpful for readers to find your work via a search engine. So let's look at the main body of the text now. We number the first page as page 3. Why do we number the first page as page 3? Well, we have to make sure that the first page is page 3. It's because page number 1 is a title page, and page number 2 is the abstract that we were just looking at. Start with typing the essay title, centered and bolded, at the top of the page. Type the text double-spaced with all sections following each other without a break. Do not use blank space between paragraphs. Create in-text citations, which we're going to be looking at shortly, and you're going to have the in-text citations to identify the sources used in the paper, and format tables and figures. We're going to be looking at all of that now. So this slide is going to explain the format and purpose of a reference page. Why do we even need a reference page? Well, each source reference within the paper should also appear on the reference page, which is normally at the back of the paper. It's always at the back of the paper. I've never seen it anywhere else. So to create a reference page, number 1, center and bold the heading, references, at the top of the page. Double-spaced reference entries. Flush left the first line of the entry and indent subsequent lines. You can use a hanging feature in Word to actually do that for you, so you're not having to press the tab bar. Step 4 is to order entries alphabetically by the author's surnames. If a source is anonymous, use its title as the author's name. Now, I'd like to mention a note here that unlike MLA formatting, or MLA stands for Modern Language Association, unlike that, APA is only interested in what they call recoverable data. That is data which other people can find. For example, personal communications such as letters or memos or emails or interviews and telephone conversations should not be included in the reference list, since they typically are not recoverable by the researchers. If there's an interview and it's on like YouTube or Spotify or somewhere like that, then I guess you can use it. Okay, so let's move on. So these are the basic rules relating to creating reference entries. So we invert author's name. So if someone's, I don't know, John Smith, we're going to put Smith first, and then we're going to put a comma, then we're going to put the other initials in caps, and we're going to put a period after each of the initials. So you only capitalize the first letter of the first word of the title, so you can see what it says there. The first word after a colon or a dash in the title, and proper nouns. So proper nouns, if you just a reminder, proper noun is the name given to something to make it more specific. E.g., rather than saying him, we're going to say Jonathan. Rather than saying city, the city, we're going to say New York. Or instead of saying tomorrow, we're going to say we can say Monday. So look at the example here. The perfectly formatted paper, how the Purdue owl saved my essay. So, so it's telling you what you capitalize, what you don't capitalize the first letter of the second word, and so on. So these things, you're not going to remember most of them, but you can refer back to them at the time you actually write your paper. So this slide has basic rules related to creating reference entries. So capitalize all major words in journal titles. Italicize titles of longer words such as books and journals, but do not italicize or underline or put quotes around the titles of shorter works such as journal articles or essays in edited collections. So this looks like a journal entry. So it's probably not a shorter article because you can see that we've italicized the titles of longer works, and this must be a longer work because the Journal of Economic Management Perspectives is italicized. And and we've capitalized all major words in the journals. So all the major words in the journal title, Journal of Economic and Management Perspectives, that we see there at the bottom of the page. The journal, the of is not a major word, so that's not capitalized. The economic is, and is not a major word. Management is capital M, and perspectives capital P. Okay, so APA is a complex system of citation that can be time-consuming to learn and to remember, and difficult to recall. It really can be quite tough. So there's tricks that we're going to use. So to help us handle the requirements of APA or anything else, if it was MLA, whatever the format is, this slide is going to introduce a strategy for surviving APA, if you like. So I'd like to stress the importance of correct identification of a type of source, e.g., is it an article from a newspaper or from a scholarly journal? Is it a hard copy or an electronic copy? Because there's lists. Once you know what it is, you can just you can either look up something similar in another journal, their references, or you can actually go to the APA website and it's going to give you information of how to do it. Or you can look at this set of PowerPoints later on to figure out how you actually do it. So it's good to identify what's going on, and then copying or mirroring. Don't like to use the word copy, we say mirror, but it's basically copying what other people have done. Be careful though when you're copying somebody else's reference, because sometimes people get it wrong, and then you copy something that's wrong and you put it into your article, and then that's not going to be very good. In-text citations. So this is when you cite, when you say who wrote or who's responsible for a particular work in the body of your text. So that's an in-text citation. They help establish credibility of the writer, that you know what you're doing, you're saying where you got the information from. So they help establish the credibility of the writer and show respect to someone else's intellectual property, so I'm acknowledging them, and consequently avoid any plagiarism issues as well. More practically, in-text citations help the reader locate the cited source in the reference page. So I know where to look for it. I find the reference as I'm reading. So it's got Schooley 2018, and then I go back to all the way to the back to the references, and I see in the references I see an expanded reference where I can actually find it. I know actually where to go to find the material that's being referenced. It's good to keep the in-text citation brief and make sure that the information provided in the body of the paper should be just enough so that the reader could easily cross-reference the citation, which is sitting at the back of the paper. You don't want them to go from the body of the paper, the main part of your paper, to be able to find the actual article that they're referring to. You just want it to be brief. You don't want it to be so extensive. Okay. So to avoid plagiarism, it's also good to put page numbers so people can actually refer specifically to what you're talking about and by page. So this basically tells you how to put page numbers in, and there's two types of basic citation. There's the parenthetical citation, and there's also the narrative citation. So the narrative citation, we see the, so let's go with the parenthetical because it comes first. It says the page number follows the year of publication, and it's separated by a comma and with a lowercase p and a period before the number. So you can see there that it's got Atkins, comma 2018, comma page, p, lowercase p, period, and 12. That's page 12. And that would be a parenthetical citation that kind of is in parentheses at the end of the statement that you've made. The narrative citation is like as you're talking, as you're writing, you just like slip it in there. So for a narrative citation, the second example, the page number comes at the end of the sentence, and once again preceded by a lowercase p and a period, and you can see that. So with the narrative citation, it says Atkins 2018 suggests that the Purdue OWL is a good resource for students, and then the actual page reference comes at the very end when you use narrative referencing. Okay, let's look at, continue with in-text citation, quotations. Now, when you have quotations, when you have quotations, this is how you deal with them. So when we're using the parenthetical citation, we need to include the author date, date of publication, and page number at the end of the quotation. So you can see that that's what they've done that there. They've put Hong, comma, 2018, comma, the page. So it's very similar to what we've done before. But because this is parenthetical, it comes at the end, and you can see how they've actually put the quote in quotation marks. It's very similar to what we've done before on the actual previous page. If you compare it, it's almost identical. If I go back a page, you see that the format is fairly similar. The difference between them is that this one is not using quotations and this one is using quotations. And then again, there's a similar layout for the narrative style. So if I look at the narrative style here and the narrative style on the previous page, the only difference is that right on this page we have a quotation marks because it's referring to a quote. So let's look at summary and or paraphrasing. So again, these follow the same guidelines as for parenthetical and narrative citations. And so for parenthetical citation, it's just, it should be relatively self-evident what's going on right there. And we can just read that through. The format, the layout is the same, but it's in summary. So in one study, the first example, parenthetical, in one study that consisted of 467 young adults, it was found that social media use may not directly affect mental health, rather it goes on. So that's just a summary. Okay, when you summarize or paraphrase what someone said, the actual quotations, the citations, work the same way as they've done on the previous couple of pages. And let's look at signal words. So signal words came up in a previous slide, but signal words are normally transitions or phrases that help you transition or to give a connection between ideas. So let's look at this. What's kind of important is for all of us is to acquire a rich repertoire of signal words and phrases. That's the key to actually writing a good paper. A lot of the time you're writing a paper, and as you're writing the paper, you find yourself using the same word, and then the paper actually starts to look a bit bad. So it's a good idea to have a whole series of other words that you can replace the first word with, so you're not repeatedly using it. So sometimes I just use the thesaurus to find a similar word. But you can see here signal verbs such as acknowledged. I may have a statement where I say the the report acknowledged or contended or maintained or responded or reported or argued or concluded. So when you have a whole repertoire of words to use, it just makes things look a lot better. Okay, so let's look at on. I may be missing a couple of points out, but I think that's some of the stuff is self-evident, or some of it is just something that you just have to read up and learn. So when the parenthetical citation includes two or more works, the way we deal with them is like here you see that what we've done, order them in the same way they appear in the reference list. And so it's basically going to be alphabetical order. Then it's going to be the author's name, the year of publication. They're separated by a semicolon, as you can see in that example below. How about when citing a work with two authors when narrative? So this is for parenthetical. How about when you've got using narrative citations? So with narrative citation, you just put an and in between the authors. So you can see De Pietri and Macpherson. So that's the narrative. It's outside of the parenthesis. It's not the parenthetical one. And the second one, the parenthetical one that you see there below, they use the actual and sign. So how about this? So just el-al, el-or, how it's pronounced. I pronounce it like an airline there. But it comes from the Latin phrase meaning and others. So just say that at the get-go. So it works with 3+ authors. And right, you're not going to list them all out because it'll take you forever. So you're going to put, say for example, Lin, et al, et al, basically all of them. 2019, and it just shows you the two different versions. The first one is the narrative. So the narrative, when you're making the reference in your narrative as you're writing and this, as you're speaking, as it were. And the second one is the parenthetical, which comes at the end, Lin, et al. And let's move on to unknown authors. When citing a work with an unknown author, use the source's full title in the narrative citation. So cite the first word of the title followed by the year of publication in the parenthetical citation. So the examples are, according to, and in parentheses, here's how gardening benefits your health, 2018. That would be the narrative. And then the parenthetical would appear to be, here's, you just use the first word. And you put the first word in quotations, and that's it. You're basically replacing the article, the name of the author with the title because you don't know the author's name. So that's what you put in place. So when you're using articles, you use quotation marks for articles and chapters. That's that you're referencing. But when it's books and reports, you don't put them in quotation marks like we've done here in the examples in blue, but you italicize them. So when citing a group author, so again, I'm just reading off from here, mention the organization. Only the first time that you use it, you're actually going to mention the organization. Say, for example, the Food and Drug Administration. The first time you mention it, you're going to write it out in full. And then after that, you're going to use an abbreviation, FDA. And just there's a little difference there, again, between narrative and parenthetical. With narrative, you can see you just put FDA, comma 2019. But with parenthetical, you have to use square brackets on it, which is interesting. If you have authors with the same last names, and just use the first initials with the last names, so it's not just using last name now, because it'd be confusing. So you use the first initial too. And when there's an author that has more than one work in a year, then the first one they call A, the second one they call B, and so on. So when citing personal communication, interviews, letters, emails, etc., so it says include the communications the communicator's name, the fact that it was personal communication, and the date of the communication. So for it tells you how to do it for a narrative citation. So you're just going to put the first example for narrative. It says personal communication and the date it happened. And for parenthetical, it's again, you're just going to put it at the end in parentheses. That's what parenthetical is. And it's basically something very similar, but it goes at the end. But it's interesting to note here that you do not include personal communication in the reference list at the back. And let's look at the citing a text with no page numbers. Parenthetical, we'll look at parenthetical first, and then after that we're just going to look at narrative. So there's 4 different methods here, and supposedly the author's name is London, and this parenthetical. So parenthetical, everything's going to appear at the end of the statement, as it were, as opposed to the narrative that we'll look on the next page. But there's several ways of doing it. We're given 4 different ways of doing it. So you can list the heading or section name. So London was the author in 2019, wrote something about the health benefits of KEL, and they're referring to the health benefits of KEL section. There's no page numbers to reference, so they're just doing it that way. I looked at the health benefits of KEL section. The second way is to actually abbreviate. If you feel that the title is too long, you can actually abbreviate health benefits of KEL section, and you can just use a couple of words and put it in quotations. And the third option is to actually reference a paragraph. So there may not be a page number, but there may be a paragraph number. So you can, again, the third option is London 2019 paragraph. You see paragraph as opposed to page is P-A-R-A, period, and then whatever paragraph it is. And then the final option you have here is you list the heading or section name and the paragraph number. So it's pretty much everything. London was the author in 2019. The article is called Health Benefits of KEL, and that's the section that they found it in, and it's in paragraph 2. That's pretty much everything. Now, when I've switched over to the next page, it's going to be the same examples, but it's going to be for narrative citation. So narrative citation, you can just flip back to this one, or we can do that, and see the similarities and the differences. So again, so scientist Jacqueline London, 2019 Health Benefits of KEL section. So look at that. The only thing is, because it's a narrative citation, we've actually mentioned the scientist's name, the researcher's name, and that's outside. And then we just put the year and enough information, so you can actually figure out where the information was found. So if I just flick back, you can see that it looks very similar. If we look at the first example, yes, it's the London has been taken out of the parentheses. We've still got the 2019 health benefits of KEL section and the 2019 health benefits of KEL section, and the following ones repeat themselves in a similar fashion. So APA does use a 5 heading levels system. So level 1 through 5. So you can see the first one, you start off level 1, centered, bold, title case headings, and then the second one is flush left, bold, and the third one is flush left but italic, and then the fourth level is not flush left but indented, and it's bold, and then the fifth one is again indented but italic. So there's a theme there. So you start off in the center, it's all bolded, everything's bolded. Start off in the center, then the next level down, the next 2 levels down are both flush left. One of them is in regular writing, and the other one is in italic. And then the next 2, 4 and 5, both of them are indented, but one of them is it's in regular, and the second one is italicized. So let's look at an example of this. So you can just basically see that methods is the first level, the top level, and it is centered, it is bold, and it's the title. And then the next level down is where it says measures, And so the next level down is flush left, bold. And level 3 is also flush left, bold, but it's exercise. It's also flush left, it's bold, but it's italicized. And then we move to the next levels, 4 and 5. 4 and 5 are both indented, and 4 is indented, bold, and 5 is indented, bold, but italicized. So it's basically just going through that stuff there. How about tables? How do we deal with tables? Tables are common and often required feature of a lot of APA format. So in this slide we're looking at now, it provides visual guidelines to formatting tables for APA papers, journal articles, whatever it is you're writing. So let's look at a few of these steps involved over here. We're going to actually put a table together. So the table format consists of 4 basic elements. The first one is the table label. So for example, the table label is table 1 in this case. The second point, or the second step, is the title in italics. You see the title where it's in italics? Top 3 NBA Season Leaders 2019. So it's in italics, it's flush left. And then the next stage, and it's single spaced as well. So we don't leave gaps between that line and getting to the table. And then we actually put in the actual table. That's the third part, the third step. And the fourth step is the citation of the source below the table in the form of a note. So you can see the example right there. So step 1 is the table label, table 1. Step 2 is the title in italics. It's like it's italicized and it's flush left and single spaced. And then we put in the table, and then below the table we put in the source as a note. Okay, so let's see what we have now. Oh, how about figures? Figures. So although figures in an APA paper are formatted in a way that's similar to the actual tables, there are a few differences, and in particular, we'll just look at a few in particular. In particular, there are, I don't know how many that we're going to go through. We'll just go through a couple of them with you. So let's just looking at this table. Now, you might provide, it may seem a bit odd though, you don't have to do this, but you may provide an additional title centered above the figure. I'm not sure I would do that myself because it says US primary energy consumption by energy source 2018. And then when you actually look at the table, within the box, it's got the same thing. I'm not sure if I would do that. I guess you can do that. But so you might provide an additional centered title above the figure if you want. Second point is that the label and title in italics are on the same line. Flush left. Okay, then you've got the figure before we had the table. So it looks fairly similar, other than it's repeated. If we actually go back to the table, we didn't actually repeat in the table. We just said top 3 NBA season leaders 2019, and then we didn't repeat anything. But when we look at this figure here, we do repeat US primary energy consumption in blue, and then the first line of the actual chart has the same information in there. Anyway, so you can do that. You can double up and put the title in there, and you can make sure that you also put the citation, and again you can see the citation is in a note. It's fairly similar, other than you can actually double up on that. You can actually double up on the information, the title, if you like. Okay, so that brings us to the end. So there is a website for APA stuff, and when you actually get a report, I'm sure you're going to be referring back to it, but I just want to make you aware that this is, on the one hand, it's fairly easy. On the other hand, it's kind of difficult. So it's easy in that it's all straightforward, but there's so much of it, and it's so detailed what they want you to do. And remember, when you're coming up with references, when you use Word, you can easily copy references from other people that have used the same reference, but make sure they've done it right. And there's something called EndNote that you can add to Word. And a lot of places that you may get your information from, say for example Google Scholar, you can actually download referencing from them. And so you can download a whole bunch of referencing when you're going through an article, and then you just use the ones that you actually need. Another thing that is obviously going to be very important is things like spelling and grammar. And there are things out there like Grammarly, which some schools offer for free, some workplaces have it in there. And Grammarly is a pretty good thing to run your paper through as well, to pick up some basic mistakes. And it will even tell you if you're talking in the active voice or the passive voice. So hopefully this will be helpful to you when you guys write your papers.